Get right into it. Sage Rosenfels with the Philadelphia Eagles defense. Are they good when they can get after the passer and they can stop the run, but they can't cover anyone in the secondary? Like, can you still be good that way?
It's harder to be. The Patriots did that for a number of years where they would be really, really good up front with their front seven. Usually had maybe a safety that was pretty good, but they would be weak at the corner spot.
Right. Troy Brown was playing corner for them once.
Yeah,
he was
right.
a receiver.
I mean, so they'd be weaker at that corner spot, but they thought, if we can get in third and long situations by stopping the run, then we have some pretty good pass rush. Of course, this is back in the days of like Vrabel and McGinnis and those types of guys that you don't need to have or spend money on a secondary or that corner position. But they have changed a little bit because they've definitely in the past few years have gone out and spent a ton of money on it was a Stephen Gilmore now makes a lot, and then there's I'm trying to think of
McCourty. Both.
Yeah. He's a heck of a player.
Multiple McCourties.
But in the past they haven't. They used to not spend money. Now they do. So I'm all about stuff. I'm a lines guy. I don't know. Maybe it's my Iowa State thing and the fact that I basically hand the ball off through most of my college career. But and you watch like the University of Wisconsin. I mean that type of thing. But if you just dominate the lines, usually the rest of the stuff sort of takes care of itself or balances things out. So I'd much rather have a better front seven than a really, really good back end, but you can't stop the run.
So there's two kind of different philosophies that defenses take today, which one is kind of like the Mike Zimmer, where everyone's in the right spot all the time, and a lot of completions go for short yards because his guys are there to make the tackles. So if you look at someone like Mike Hughes, he's allowing a high completion percentage into his coverage overall, but not very many yards into his coverage. And for the nickel corners, for Mackenzie Alexander, Captain Munnerlyn before him, it was often that way. Whereas like you could complete passes against Zimmer's defense, but you're not getting very many yards. In fact, right now, the Vikings best in the NFL in terms of yards per completion. So they're not giving up a lot of big plays and things like that.
We have a very good tackling secondary.
Very
a lot
good.
of times,
Absolutely.
you go think of the past, when there was like, the man-to-man corners, I was like Deion Sanders was one of the original, just sort of all over the place. But they always ended up being, known as bad tacklers or somebody that doesn't want to get involved in there. And they sort of do the Ole type of tackle because their job is just to cover people man-to-man. But these guys, I mean, Rhodes is a good tackler for the most part.
Yeah.
And Wayne's, I think, is a good tackler for not a huge guy. And I like how Mike Hughes comes up and wraps people up and gets involved. And obviously Mackenzie Alexander is sort of that slot guy. He's involved in a lot of times in those bubbles and wide receiver screens, and he gets in there. And part of the run game, too, he gets in there. So I love the way our man-to-man corners tackle.
But the other way to do it, other than, you're in position all the time, like you said, you've got great tacklers and things like that, is to take more risks and try to get turnovers. So looking at the Vikings last year, they were 18th in terms of turnover percentage as a defense. So even though they were top 5 in yards allowed, they were only as good as New York and Atlanta last year at getting the other team to turn the ball over. And things are not super different this year. Daniel Jones throws an interception at the very end of the game, but you don't see the Vikings picking off a ton of passes, taking a ton of risks, trying to jump balls, and also you don't see them giving up a lot of big plays either. I think Philadelphia is probably on the other side of that, where they want to get picks. They want to take a little more risks and utilize what their defensive line can do for them, creating the pressure. And that, to me, Sage, is what this comes down to, because I think that the Vikings can move the ball against the secondary if they can get it out and if Kirk Cousins doesn't start seeing ghosts. But I think that they can have offensive success against this Eagles defense like they did last year, but it will be all about whether Cousins has that big turnover that he seems to have every single time they play an important game.
That, and you only have enough time, to throw the ball. That's not just quick game or sort of wide receiver screens or getting the ball out quick or just the play action, but can they just drop back on 3rd and 8s and protect him allow him to hitch once or 2 times that pocket? This D line is really, really good. They've been good for a number of years, but I think Fletcher Cox, for whatever reason, I think he's in the same ballpark as some of the Aaron Donald type players in the league. He's a top 5 interior guy, just so tenacious. He's good against the run, but so tenacious and athletic. As a pass rusher, I'm interested to see what Rick Dennison and Stefanski and what they decide to do from a protection standpoint and how they really protect this offensive line, because this is a type of team that they can sort of wreck your offensive game plan and create those big turnovers that Kirk Cousins seems to find every once in a while.
So Philly did not have a lot of sacks through the first couple of weeks and then had an outburst last week against Luke Falk, as I guess most teams would do against Luke Falk, of sacks. But a better metric to look at is QB hits in terms of how much they're disrupting the passer, is that the pressure, and they are third in the NFL right now, only behind New England and Pittsburgh by one. They have 36 quarterback hits in 5 games, which seems like a lot of punishment to put on opposing quarterbacks, Sage. And that's what we saw from Cousins against Chicago. Chicago's coverage was not unbelievable. There were receivers that were open throughout that game, and yet it was their ability to get after Kirk Cousins that caused him to speed up his progressions, to make mistakes, to fumble the football on the first drive of the second half. And I feel like if Philadelphia's defensive line is every bit as good as it was in the NFC Championship game and as it's still continued to be, that becomes very, very difficult for Cousins. It's almost like at some point he has to prove that he can handle one of these teams that has a bunch of maulers up front.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge challenge. In this football game is it's in we talk about, it's funny, we talk about so many aspects of this team, but in particular it seems to be the straight drop back pass scenario and how we're going to and again, this week has the pass rushers. We'll see how it goes. And this is a week that he may have to, we're going to see a top-notch quarterback, Carson Wentz, and we're going to see Kirk Cousins. And I'm excited to see, how that sort of all pans out over the course of a football game. And it should be a good one. This is going to be 2 good football teams that both need to win badly. And it should be a good early season game. Almost, to me, it doesn't feel like a playoff game per se, but man, since the Eagles are just in the Super Bowl and you see them as a contender when they're hot, they're really, really good. I see them as a playoff caliber playoff football team, which makes this game, even more important.
Oh, I feel like it's a huge swing game, not only for the schedule because it just continues to get harder as we go forward, but also for the just morale of the team. I mean, we knew that they were going to go blow the doors off the Giants. That was one of the most abysmal defensive performances that I can ever remember against a Giants team, or I'm sorry, against a Vikings team where the Giants were just confused and there were open receivers all over the place. I mean, I don't expect that to happen the same exact way here. And also, as you mentioned, Philly's offense is really good. I want to get into that in a minute, but we had Jeremiah Searles on last week, former Vikings offensive lineman, and I asked him, what can they do to help these offensive linemen? Because Fletcher Cox is going to blow people up, right? I mean, and Brandon Graham is going to blow people up. These guys are just too good. And he suggested getting back in that shotgun a little bit more than they had been. And you and I talked about this last year where we felt like DeFilippo was in the shotgun a little too often, but it really worked against Philly last year with a lot of those quick passes to start the game. I'm just going through it today and looking at it. The first drive, the scripted drive last year against Philadelphia was short pass to the tight end, short pass to Stephon Diggs, 24-yard throw to Adam Thielen, short pass to Diggs, short pass to Diggs. I mean, I think that they came out and got the ball out so fast that Philadelphia's defensive line couldn't get on top of Kirk Cousins, and I wonder if they try to do that again.
Yeah, and I will say this: we talk about this sort of shotgun or under center and the running game with this play action. We've gone over that many times, but when you're definitely going to throw the ball, being in shotgun it's great. It allows the running backs to get up in front of the quarterback for any blitzing people, but it also I think it just sort of helps with the offensive line, the interior aspect of the offensive line, because the quarterback's already sort of away from them and they're not going to get pushed back because these guys like Fletcher Cox can really just drive a center or a guard straight back into the quarterback's lap. But if he's already back there at 5 or 6 yards, that does help out the offense. And it's interesting, watching the 49ers game the other day, and they're this really good running football team and the Shanahan offense, but they're definitely in shotgun a lot, their fair share, but they do a lot of different things. It's sort of fake jet sweep that somehow turns into a tight end screen. They're very creative in how they do different things in their offense. It's not just sort of this under center and play action and bootleg stuff. They still find ways to almost do play action and bootleg, but in that shotgun formation, and it's very, very effective. And anything I think that the Vikings can do to not have Kirk just staying in the middle of that pocket for 15 to 20 times a game, that would be bad. If Kirk Cousins drops back 5 steps or 7 steps on straight dropbacks 20 times in this game, I got to think the Vikings we're down by 14 points and lose.
By the way, Fletcher Cox has already created 24 pressures in 5 weeks. So even
That's
though,
crazy.
yeah, even though he doesn't have a sack, for an interior defensive lineman to be creating that much pressure is